Global reactions are pouring in after the United States and Israel launched coordinated strikes on Iran, triggering fears of a wider regional war. French President Emmanuel Macron has called for an emergency meeting of the United Nations Security Council, warning that the escalation poses serious risks to global peace and security. Meanwhile, Britain, France, and Germany say they were not involved in the operation, but remain in close contact with allies, urging a return to negotiations over Iran's nuclear program. Top European Union officials, including Ursula von der Leyen, are calling the situation deeply concerning and urging all sides to protect civilians and respect international law.
Earlier this morning, the United States and Israel struck targets in Iran. Iran has since launched indiscriminate strikes across the region. I know the British people and communities across our country will be deeply concerned about what this means for security and stability and for the fate of innocent people across the region, which for so many of us includes friends and family members. So whilst the situation is evolving very quickly, I want to set out our response. The United Kingdom played no role in these strikes, but we have long been clear the regime in Iran is utterly abhorrent. They have murdered thousands of their own people, brutally crushed dissent, and sought to destabilize the region. Even in the United Kingdom, the Iranian regime poses a direct threat to dissidents and to the Jewish community. Over the last year alone, they have backed more than 20 potentially lethal attacks on UK soil. So it is clear they must never be allowed to develop a nuclear weapon. That remains the primary aim of the United Kingdom and our allies, including the US. I condemn Iran's attacks today on partners across the region, many of which are not parties to this conflict. We extend our support and solidarity to them as part of our commitments to the security of our allies in the Middle East. We have a range of defensive capabilities in the region, which we've recently strengthened. Our forces are active, and British planes are in the sky today as part of coordinated regional defensive operations to protect our people, our interests, and our allies, as Britain has done before, in line with international law. We've stepped up protections for British bases and personnel to their highest level. We are also reaching out to UK nationals in the region and doing everything we can to support them. I've been speaking with leaders today from the E3 and across the region. It is vital that we prevent further escalation and return to a diplomatic process. We want to see peace and security and the protection of civilian life. Iran can end this now. They should refrain from further strikes, give up their weapons programs, and cease the appalling violence and repression against the Iranian people, who deserve the right to determine their own future, in line with our long-standing position. This is the route to de-escalation and back to the negotiating table.
In the Middle East, reactions are sharply divided. Gulf nations, including Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and Kuwait, have condemned Iranian retaliatory strikes on their territory. calling them violations of sovereignty and warning of serious consequences. China is calling for urgent restraint after U.S. and Israeli strikes on Iran, warning that the Middle East is at risk of sliding into a broader and more dangerous conflict.
On the morning of February 28th, the armed forces of the United States and Israel began conducting military airstrikes on Iranian territory. The scale and nature of the military, political, and propaganda preparations that preceded this reckless step, including the deployment of a large military force to the region. The United States leaves no doubt that this is a premeditated and unprovoked act of armed aggression against a sovereign and independent state, a member of the United Nations, in violation of the fundamental principles and norms of international law. It is also condemnable that the attacks are once again being carried out under the cover of a renewed negotiation process, supposedly aimed at ensuring the long-term normalization of the situation around the Islamic Republic. And this is contrary to the signals conveyed to the Russian side about the lack of Israeli interest in a military confrontation with the Iranians. The international community, including the leadership of the UN and the IAEA, is obliged to immediately provide an objective and uncompromising assessment of these irresponsible actions aimed at undermining peace, stability, and security in the Middle East. Washington and Tel Aviv have once again embarked on a dangerous adventure, which is rapidly bringing the region closer to a humanitarian, economic, and possibly even radiological catastrophe. The intentions of the aggressors are clear and are being declared by them quite openly: to destroy the constitutional order and eliminate the leadership of a state they dislike, a state that has refused to submit to forceful dictates and hegemony. The responsibility for the negative consequences of this man-made crisis, including an unpredictable chain reaction and the escalation of the spiral of violence, lies entirely with them. The severe consequences of these reckless actions for the global non-proliferation regime, whose cornerstone is the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, are being openly ignored. At the same time, the American-Israeli tandem hides behind a supposed concern that the Iranians might acquire nuclear weapons. Bombing nuclear facilities that are under IAEA safeguards is unacceptable. In reality, Washington and Tel Aviv have motives that have nothing to do with the non-proliferation regime. They cannot fail to understand that by plunging the Middle East into the abyss of uncontrolled escalation, they are in fact encouraging countries around the world, especially in the region, to acquire increasingly serious means to counter emerging threats. Of particular concern is the systematic nature of the destabilizing actions carried out by the U.S. administration over the past months against the international legal foundations of the world order, including non-interference in internal affairs, the rejection of the threat or use of force, and the peaceful resolution of international disputes. We demand that the situation be immediately brought back on track toward political and diplomatic settlement. Russia, as before, is ready to assist in finding peaceful solutions based on international law, mutual respect, and a balance of interests.